Hello and welcome to the multicolored portion of my limited set review for Outlaws at Thunder Junction. Today we're looking at multicolored stuff. The big part of the set review, always the longest piece, and there's always some very powerful cards in the multicolored section, so as you can see by the one on your screen right now. If you have not been here before, these are the way that I choose to grade cards. Let me get out of the way. There are essentially 5 tiers. Tier 1 is good, Tier 5 is bad. As simple as that. There's some brief descriptions about what the tiers mean, but I am just going to get started because we got a long way to go here. A Cool the Unrepentant. It was for black, red for a 5/5 flying trample, and you can sacrifice 3 other creatures, and you put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery, only once each turn. So that's an ability that doesn't really matter. You're never going to use that ability. In limited, it just doesn't. A, you don't have 3 creatures you want to sacrifice, and B, there's nothing worth putting into play for sacrificing 3 creatures. It's just not realistic. So how much are you willing to pay for 4 mana 5/5 flying trample that's really hard to cast? And in a deck that's specifically red and black, I could see this being tier 2. It's fine, right? It's still going to be tough to cast even in a 2-color deck. Limited mana bases and all that aren't very good. But like again, it's just such a cost to have 2 double pips in the mana cost, and not be doing something like super transformative, right? It's no ETB, whatever. It's still an okay card, still a card you're going to play in your red-black decks, but not a card you're interested in like trying to make work anywhere else. Anti-Flash the Veteran. 3 and 1 of each of the Naya colors of mana for a 4/5 with Flash. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Whenever it becomes tapped, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play one of those cards this turn. So this is really nice, right? 6 mana on your opponent's turn, you flash this in, you get to return something. It's really hard for by turn 6 there not to be a permanent card in your graveyard. It just doesn't really. It's not realistic, you know what I mean? Like, you're just going to have something in there. Tier 1 might be too high for this. Maybe this is really only Tier 2. It is kind of sick, though, because, when it attacks, you essentially draw a card. Pretty good on a creature with Flash. Means your opponent can't necessarily play around it existing. It can also blow out, it can be like a blowout. You can flash this in and block one of their things, or you can flash it in and one of your creatures has an ETB that deals damage. I don't think there are actually any of those in the set, but something like that, where like you just can have immediate board impact like that. Just does a lot of good stuff, just doing a lot of good stuff. 6 mana, yes, it's difficult to cast, but green is one of the pips, so usually you're going to have access to mana. I think the mana is going to be pretty decent in this set. I like this card. Annie joins up. 1 and 1 of each of the Naya colors again for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 5 damage to up to target creature or planeswalker and opponent controls. I don't know what the deal with that was. If a triggered ability of a legendary creature you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So this is mostly a 4 mana deal 5. Yes, the legendary stuff does come up, but how good is a 4 mana deal 5? It's not great. It's like, let's think about this, right? So 3 mana deal 5, very good. 5 mana deal 5, terrible. Unplayably bad. So this is somewhere in between those, and it has some upside, but this is one where it's like, I don't know if the cost of putting 3 colors of mana in your deck is worth this. It's kind of like if you're already able to cast it, you can play it and it's fine card, not a card that you're like trying to get into like Naya, like, oh man, I gotta stretch my mana to cast this thing. That's not really what's going on here. I think it's okay. Doubling your triggered abilities of legendary creatures is relevant, but not and it's not like it does nothing, it's not like it's completely useless, but not something I'm super highly prioritizing. Assimilation Aegis. 1 white, blue for an equipment. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target creature until it leaves the battlefield. When it becomes attached to a creature, for as long as it's attached to that creature, that creature becomes a copy of the creature card exiled with this card, and you can equip for 2. So this is just an Oblivion Ring, right? You exile a creature, Oblivion Ring that only hits creatures, right? But you can also just turn one of your small guys into like whatever their creature is that you exiled. So that's pretty sick. It is an artifact, which is easier to destroy than an enchantment usually, and that is true in this set as well. But I mean, the base, like the floor for an Oblivion Ring tends to be pretty much tier 2, and so this has enough upside that I think I'm willing to put it up in tier 1. It's just like there's a lot of powerful things going on in this set. If you exile your opponent's best creature and then you have the ability at some point later on to turn one of your creatures into it, it's just it can just be a huge swing. So yeah, I really like this card. At knife point, 1 black-red for an enchantment. As long as it's your turn, outlaws you control have first strike. Whenever you commit a crime, create a 1/1 mercenary token. So this is a tough evaluation, right? So it's 3 mana to do nothing, right? It does nothing up front. Oh, but your creatures have first strike. That's not enough for me, right? So if you have a 0 mana way to commit a crime, or a really cheap way to commit a crime, okay, now we're off to the races. We've started, we make 1. If you make two things with this, is it good enough? 3 mana, 2 1/1s, your creatures have first strike for the rest of the game. It's close, right? It's close. You need 2 triggers on this. And then it's like good. And if you do get 3 triggers, it's great, right? If you get 3 triggers on this card, it's really, really good. And I'm not denying that. It's just my question of how often can you do that? And there are repeatable crime generators, specifically in red, that 2 mana 1/3, but that costs mana, so you're basically paying 1 and tapping it every turn. There is some, like, removal works, obviously, but I'm really, really skeptical of an enchantment that on its face, like, doesn't impact the board immediately and requires you to do some work to get it to do stuff. And it only has first strike on your turn, which is probably good for like gameplay reasons, but I think makes this quite a bit worse. If this gave first strike just generally, I actually would be kind of interested, because it does have more of an immediate impact on defense, which is kind of what you need the immediate impact to do. So I don't know. This is one that is potentially going to move up, but I'm starting pretty low on it. Badlands Revival. 3 black, green for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You can return up to 1 target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is, we've got our Urborg Repossession, except it goes right on the battlefield. It's a little more expensive, right? That's more expensive than that card, but I mean, it's just a lot, right? It's a 5 mana reanimate. Not good, right? We've seen many 5 mana reanimate cards just not be very good. But 5 mana reanimate and then draw a card, I mean, that's pretty good. Because when you think about this, you think, okay, so what does this do on average? Okay, 5 mana 3/3 that gets back another permanent from your graveyard. Right? That's kind of what this looks like. How good is that? I mean, it's pretty good. And then like the that's kind of like sort of the floor. I mean, I guess the floor is a little bit low. Actually, no, hold on. I lied. I need to move this down. Almost got baited there for a second. We moved it down to tier 3. That's where it belongs. It's a 5 mana mythic gold uncommon. We know those are bad. Hold on. I had to refresh. I had to refresh myself. I was like, wait a minute. I got too caught up in my own hype. This is actually not as good as I thought it was originally. Needed to move it down. That was a good catch. It was gonna be a problem. We were gonna have problems. Okay. If I left this in tier 2, right, that would have been, oof, man, can't be like the 5 mana signposts aren't tier 2 cards guy, and then have this be in tier 2. That's a bad look for me, right? But yes, it has the 5 mana signpost problem, and it has the problem of like sometimes there just isn't stuff you want in your graveyard, and this does nothing. So, but it has extremely high upside, and there is a land cycler in green at uncommon. Baron Bertram Greywater. 2 white, black for a 3/4. When 1 or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 Vampire Rogue token with lifelink. This ability triggers only once each turn, and you can sacrifice another creature and artifact to draw a card. So this is one of the very, very few things in the set that allows you to sacrifice treasures to do anything meaningful. And so for that reason I'm interested in it. However, what I'm not interested in is 4 mana 3/4 don't do anything. That's very bad. I'm very not excited about that. This card on its face kind of looks like a Denethor from Lord of the Rings. It's like, ooh, it's like a guy that like enables stuff and like it's whatever. This card doesn't enable itself like Denethor did. And B, like it's just a little slow, right? Like it's just a little bit like play this on 4 and like hope your opponent doesn't kill it, and then they probably can kill it because it's 2024 limited. Like they're probably going to be able to remove this, and you just like it's a good engine, but you kind of need to like give it a little bit of time. So for that reason, I'm keeping it out of tier 2 and putting it in tier 3. I still think this is going to be an okay card, but not anything special. Bonnie Paul, Clear Cutter, 3 green, blue for a 6/5 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, you create a Ox with creature power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control, and whenever you attack, draw a card. Then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battle or graveyard onto the battlefield. Yeah, I mean obviously this card's just ridiculously good. It's 6 mana, but who cares? Like it's just winning you the game. You make 2 enormous creatures on turn 6. If somehow you manage to cast this on turn 5, like the game is really over. Like the fact that you can attack the turn you play this and draw a card is crazy. Like there's just so much about this card that does things that I don't really need to even talk about too much. Breaches the Blast Maker. 1 blue-red for a 3/3 menace. When you cast your second spell each turn, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, flip a coin. When you win the flip, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. When you lose the flip, it deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to any target. So, first of all, Wizards they've foiled me once again, because now, for the first time in my life, I'm going to have to call heads on a coin flip because I want to lose the flip. We all know that tails is the mathematically optimal call on coin flips. Everybody knows this, and so as a result, me having to now call heads to try to lose flips is going to it's just a disaster. I hate that, because losing the flip is in a lot of cases going to be better than winning the flip. What is the point of having a coin flip with 2 positive abilities? We want the gameplay to always be positive. No. Madge. I'm mad. I'm mad at you, Wizards of the Coast. Force players to do things that can be negative sometimes. Anyways. This is unfortunate. However, the card is good by itself. It's a 3 mana 3/3 menace, which is just a good stat line. It does need help. Like, it needs enabling, right? Essentially, I'm grading this card as mostly 3 mana 3/3 menace, and 3 mana 3/3 menace is pretty good. And then like there's like some games where it just goes off and like you have an artifact in play, and it works, you know. Once again, a rare way to sacrifice artifacts, but not super common. So, yeah. Bruce Tarl, Roving Rancher. 2 red, white for a 4/3 human warrior. Oxen you control have double strike. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, exile the top card of your library. If it's a land card, create a 2/2 ox. Otherwise, you may cast the card until your next turn. Yeah, this card's messed up. Once again, just tons of stats for... Like, the best case scenario is 4 mana, 4/3, exile a land, and then you make a 2/2. That's great. The worst case scenario is 4 mana, 4/3, exile a spell, and then, like, next turn you just get to cast the spell. Like, this card's just sick, right? It's just so good. Yeah, it's just, yeah. It's another card that's rooting for you to miss. Like, it's the upside is the downside is the upside, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, right? It's like, yeah. So another one of those ones where it's like, I'm hoping I hit a land. It's like, well, you know, I don't know. Yeah. Cactus Folk, Sure Shot. 2 red-green for a 4/4 with reach and ward 2. At the beginning of combat on your turn, other creatures you control with power 4 or greater gain trample and haste till end of turn. I like this card. I don't... Oh, it actually has... This is so funny to me, by the way. Like, why... Why are we gonna make a gun, but then just make it a crossbow? You know what I mean? Like, you can clearly see that it's like, actually, this is a gun the whole time. But, like, you have to make it look like a crossbow because I don't know, the gaming board rating agency like forces you to not to be. I don't know what the Magic the Gathering's rating is. I think it's like M like 13 or something. I don't know. Anyways, for whatever reason, you aren't allowed to do like real guns in the set, but you're allowed to do crossbow that is basically like I don't know. It's it's uh it's something for sure. Anyways, the card's pretty good. It's just you know 4 mana 4/4 reach ward too. It's gonna be difficult for your opponent to get rid of it, and it blocks a lot of stuff. It solves a lot of your problems in red green. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you're giving a bunch of stuff haste. It's kind of a big threat. They're gonna have big stuff that can come in and attack early. Giving trample's nice too. Like this card quite a bit. Congregation Griff. One green white for a 1/4 with flying and lifelink. When it attacks while saddled, it gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of mounts you control, and you can saddle it for 3. Yeah, I like this. I mean, it's a 3 mana 1/4 lifelink, flying lifelink. How good is that card? It's okay. I'm not thrilled about it, but it's okay. And then, it's a mount synergy, and like it is, like it's pretty easy to just saddle this and give it. It always gets +1/+1, but there's a bunch of like counter synergies going on in green too. This is a good place to put +1/+1 counters, so I kind of like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a solid card. Not blowing me away by any means, but not. It's the first time I saw this card, I was like, what? I was like, is this really that good? And then I was like, oh, it does have lifelink. That's good in limited. Flying is good in limited. The axioms kind of coming together here. Obviously, it would be better if it was a 2/3. It would basically just be really, really good if it was a 2/3. It's not a 2/3, but that's fine. Doc Arlock, Grizzled Genius. Green blue for a 2/3. Spells you cast from your graveyard or from exile cost 2 less to cast. Plotting cards from your hand costs 2 less. Yeah, this thing's great. Obviously. It enables you to plot cards for cheaper, which is really, really powerful. And you get to essentially cast your spells for like probably about half of what they would normally cost. And up front it's just a 2 mana 2/3, which is pretty good. And I don't know about the casting stuff from graveyard thing. I don't know about that, but yeah, you can also do that. Area to the Beguiler, and it is a beguile. There's some beguiling text on this card for sure. 1 white, blue, black for a 4/4 lifelink. When an aura you control becomes attached, I'm just not even gonna bother reading this. It's a 4 mana 4/4 lifelink. The rest of the text is so weird and niche and specific that you're not ever gonna have it interact with anything ever. So don't worry about it. Basically, is what I'm saying. It's kind of just a 4 mana 4/4 lifelink, which is pretty good. They don't print like big lifelink very often because it's kind of annoying to play against. Your opponent just kind of plays. It looks like Helena Bonham Carter, but anyway, I need to get off the wild ride here. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep making sure I didn't miss anything on that text, which I don't think I did. Eartha Joe, Frontier Mentor. 2 red white for a 2/4. When it enters the battlefield, you create a mercenary creature token. And whenever you activate an ability that targets a creature or player, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, 4 mana 2/4, make a 1/1. Not as good as 4 mana 3/3, make a 1/1, but still pretty good. Like, you're still pretty happy about that. And, you've got a solid 4-drop. Can't have too many of them, but, I'm sure there's other abilities than just the mercenary abilities. And yeah, that's kind of that's kind of what's going on here. Form a posse. X red white for a sorcery. Create X 1/1 red mercenary creature tokens. That's it. They don't get haste or anything either. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is just not super. Like, if you think about this, right? 4 mana for 2 1/1s, very bad deal. 5 mana for 3 1/1s, you're starting to get somewhere. 6 mana, okay. Like, I'm pretty happy about that. So 6 mana is when this card starts being okay, and that's just not where I want to be in red-white. Red-white looking a lot worse than it has recently. Grid Mirror of the Wilds. Red, white, green for a 3/3 with haste. Non-token creatures you control have tap, create a token that's a copy of target token you control that entered the battlefield this turn. So it can do that immediately. It's also a 3/3 haste. The thing that's holding it back is the ability doesn't really it's how good is this? It's okay. It's not great. There's not that many tokens that you're like, man, I'm so thrilled to be able to copy this. Like, yeah, you're making a bunch of mercenaries, but is making another one worth tapping your guy? Not really, usually. I suppose that you could just do it with every single one of your creatures. You could be like, okay, I'm going to make one mercenary, tap every single one of my creatures, make 5 mercenaries. That's okay. But is it better than attacking your opponent? In a lot of cases, no. But this thing just has haste, so it's solid. Again, color restrictions are keeping this out of Tier 1. If this were a 2-color card, it would be in Tier 1. Having to being 3 colors makes it tough. Honest Rutstein. 1 green, black for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. I mean, what is there to dislike about this? Obviously, the Gravedigger element of it is fine. I don't think it's especially amazing, but you get. It is interesting, right? Like, creature spells casting 1 less to cast. It's not great because you want to cast this on turn 6 to get back something, but I think that just getting something back is good enough that you're happy. It looks a lot like the guy from Neon Dynasty. Gravelighter. Looks a lot like Gravelighter. Gravelighter was insane. This card is about the same, I think. You can also get this back. You can loop this with itself, which you could not do with Gravelighter, so that's something to think about. Intimidation Campaign. 1 blue-black for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life, you draw a card. When you commit a crime, you may return this to its owner's hand. So we've seen versions of this effect before, and they've both been very good. This is worse than the previous 2 effects of Dolven's Acuity and Disinformation Campaign, because you are only draining your opponent for 1 and drawing a card, which is less impactful than the other 2. It's still okay, I think. It is also worse these days to be doing nothing. You are basically cycling on turn 3. Again, it's good. I think this is good. I think this is a good card, but will it be great? I think in the aggregate, probably no. In some decks, it may have a good home. You really need to have 2 mana blockers if you're going to play this card, though. That's really what you need, because otherwise this is going to get you killed. Gem Lightfoot, Sky Explorer. 2 white blue for a 3/3 flying vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, you draw a card. So obviously the turn you cast this, you do not draw a card. And it's got a lot of problems. 4 mana 3/3 flying vigilance is just not a very good stat line. It's okay. It's not great. It's okay. But, you're threatening to draw a card at the end of your next turn. If your opponent doesn't remove this, it does sort of start to, snowball if you're doing the thing. I think this deck is probably really bad, and I'm going to actively be trying to avoid drafting it early on in the format. It just is. Forcing you to not cast spells on your turn is not something you want to do. And so I think blue-white is going to be in a tough spot in this format, and this card is not helping alleviate that. Jolene Plundering Pugilist. 1 red-green for a 4/2. When you attack with 1 or more creatures power 4 or greater, create a treasure token, and you can pay 1 red and sacrifice a treasure to have it deal 1 damage to any target. This card's okay. It's a good use for treasures. It does work with itself. When it attacks, it makes a treasure token, which is good, but it is also just a 3 mana 4/2, which dies to everything and can't block very well. So that's why I balanced it out and put it in Tier 3. Yeah. That's about it. Comball, Profiteering Mayor. 1 white black for a 2/4. Whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your opponent's control, for each of them create a tapped token that's a copy of it. This ability triggers only once each turn. And whenever one or more tokens enter the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So whenever your opponent makes a mercenary, this thing drains them and you get it. It is also just a 3-mana 2/3. But again, like making all your tokens drain your opponent for 1 is really good. But doesn't work by itself, so we put it in tier 2 instead of tier 1. Maybe I come back to regret this. Obviously, like, the difference between tier 2 and tier 1 is kind of like, tier 1 sort of like is just does all the stuff itself. Tier 2 tends to be like very, very, very good in the right situations, but doesn't quite do everything by itself. So that's kind of like a good distinction between the 2 tiers, and that's why this is in tier 2. But again, a very powerful card. Kellen joins up. Green, white, blue for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a non-land card from your mana value 3 less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So, do you remember Broker's Hideout, I think it was called? That just put a +1/+1 counter on everything at the end of your turn? This is not that. But, if you have enough legendary creatures, it could be. This is one of those cards that, like, I think is kind of bad, and in a lot of decks I think it's going to be bad. It is 3 colors. Be advised. Casting it not the easiest. You do get to plot something from your hand that may not necessarily have plot, which could be good. Not super jazzed about it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, up front, you're not really getting anything. Like, there's no value to be gleaned here. So you really need to have a lot of legendaries for this to work, and legendaries notably do not play well in multiples. They have to be like different legendaries, so they don't even have to. But like again, there's some tension there. Is all I'm saying. Kellen the Kid, green, white, blue for a 3/3 flying lifelink. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or less mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Yeah, I mean, this is good. 3 mana 3/3 the flying lifelink is great. Again, the reason this card is in tier 2 and not tier 1 is partially because of the mana cost and partially because it doesn't do everything by itself. But it is a really, really powerful card, and if your opponent doesn't answer it, it's going to be a problem. Yep, that's about it. that's kind of the deal, is that it's going to be really difficult if your opponent doesn't answer this, but it has problems of casting it. Karim Violent Cacophony. 2 blue-red for a 2/3 flying. When you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it and draw a card. So normally this type of card is very bad. 4 mana 2/3 flyer don't do anything is generally not very good. But with plot in the set, I mean, not hard to imagine going plot something on 3 and to play this and to cast the plot thing on 4. Like, it's just easy to imagine doing that. There is a critical mass of things to enable you to do that. There's enough cheap things that, like, you could go play this on 5 and cast a 1 mana spell. That's not inconceivable. All you need to do is trigger this one time, and it's amazing. And if your opponent can't kill it, it becomes... And there's nothing they can do, right? You cast this as it enters the battlefield. Once it enters the battlefield, you are then, like, once it resolves, you have the ability to cast another spell. So it's it's just gonna get it's gonna get that value if because when you cast, right, it's not when it resolves. So yeah, really cool. Laughing Jasper Flint. 1 black-red for a 4/3. Creatures you control but don't own are mercenaries in addition to their other types. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library, where X is the number of outlaws you control. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from one of those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. So, it's a 3 mana 4/3. 3 mana 4/3, these are Hearthstone stats. 3 mana 4/3, pretty good. Like, that's pretty good. on your turn, you're exiling at least one card from your opponent's library, and like probably more than one card in a lot of spots. So your opponent's like just has to kill this. Obviously, if they just kill it, it is not a problem. But that's what I said about Bonehorde Dracosaur. If they just kill it, it's not a problem. But I mean, if they don't kill it, it's a real problem. You're drawing an additional card every turn, and this is just good rate up front, right? 3-mana 4/3 is just good rate up front. Like, yeah. I mean, no ETB again. So there is concerns with this. I probably should have it in tier 2 and not tier 1, but it's kind of on that borderline where I don't know. It does really threaten to run away with the game. Lazav, Familiar Stranger. 1 blue-black for a 1/4. When you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature was exiled this way, you may have it become a copy of that card until the end of turn. This ability triggers only once each turn. So I don't love this. The base stats are a 3-mana 1/4, which is pretty bad. It can block, but not super well. You have to commit crimes, which is doable, but not free. And like, this is another one of those things where it's like, if thing happens, scale this once a turn. Becomes like a 2. Like, even if this is a 2/5, how good is it? It's not amazing. Like, you're not thrilled about that. I'm actually coming down on this a little bit even more. I'm going to leave it in tier 3, but I'm not super excited about this card. Leah. Undefeated Slickshot. 1 blue-red for a 3/3 with Prowess. When you cast a multicolored instant or sorcery spell from your hand, exile that spell instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, it becomes plotted. So that gives you a second copy of all your multicolored spells. There aren't that many of those, so it's not going to be activating that much. But 3-mana 3/3 Prowess is big and attacks really well, and there is the blue-red gold uncommon that this works with, so be advised. Make your own luck. 3 green-blue for a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may exile non-land card from among them. If you do, it becomes plotted. Put the rest into your hand. So basically, 5 mana, draw 3. One of the cards you draw, you can plot. So you're getting a little bit of a rebate on casting that card. How good is that? Well, how good is a 5 mana, draw 3? Just 5 mana, draw 3 cards straight up. Well, I would put it in tier 4 or 5. Probably closer to tier 4. Okay, so I've bumped this up an entire tier as a result of you getting to get a little bit of your mana back next turn, which is a long time. Like, next turn is very far away from now. Now, one of the things that's nice about this card is that it allows you to do something that is not super prevalent in the set, which is plot an instant and then cast the instant on your opponent's turn. So you can, in some cases, get that value a little bit sooner, which is nice. But overall, I think this is going to be okay and not actually super amazing, but not super terrible either. It's also, we have the 5 mana gold uncommon problem once again, where it's like, if this is one of the best cards in your color pair, it's a problem because you're getting into the color pair for a 5-drop, which is bad because it's bad for your curve. Anyways, Malcolm the Eyes. 1 and a red, or not 1, a red, blue-red for a 2/2 flying haste. When you cast your second spell each turn, investigate. Simple, sick card, 2 mana 2/2 flying haste is already really, really good. And then sometimes it's cheap enough that you can, like, on turn 4, play a 2 mana spell. Alright, well, you you have investigated and you also have a 2/2 flying haste. Great. On turn 2, you just play this. It's just great. So all the scenarios that exist in the game, this card's good in, so I expect it to be a good card. Marchesa, Dealer of Death. Blue, red, black for a 3/4. When you commit a crime, you may pay 1. If you do, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Again, this is being hurt by being 3 colors. It's a good card, but again, like, it's 3 mana 3/4, which is good. 3 mana 3/4 is a good stat line, but it's a 3 mana 3/4 that's like, well, if it survives, I do stuff. So One of the nice things about this one is that you don't care so much about playing this later in the game. Like, you don't have to play this on 3. You would like your 3-mana spells to be playable on turn 3. But if you play this on like turn 5, then you get to do the thing immediately. Yeah, I mean that's nice too. That's a nice thing as well. So it's yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's a good card, but not amazing, right? Miram Herd Whisperer. Green, white for a 3/2. As long as it's your turn, mounts and vehicles you control have hexproof, and whenever a mount or vehicle attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah, this is really strong, right? Base rate is good up front, and it enables the thing that this deck is trying to do, which is mount whatever. So, yeah, not really any issues with this. Seems like a super solid golden common. A Becca Splitter of Seconds. 1 blue, black, red for a 2/5 menace. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this phase. So I don't know what I don't know what this does. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know what this does. I don't know if untapping is part of the upkeep or if that's before. I thought that was before upkeep. So I don't think you draw, right? The draw is a different draw. The draw step is after the upkeep step. This is just a rules nightmare, so I'm not going to grade it anything other than tier 3. It's a 4-mana 2/5 with menace that does something when it hits your opponent. That's how I'm rating this card. I really and truly do not know what this does. So I'm just going to grade it as if it kind of does, like, it untaps some of your stuff, is kind of how I'm rating this, and that's sort of okay. I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this card. Oko. 2 green blue for a 3 loyalty planeswalker. At the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko the Ringleader becomes a copy of up to 1 target creature you control until end of turn, except he has hexproof. Weird that the anyway. Why? No. Anyways. Why are we doing it? +1, draw 2 cards. If you've committed a crime this turn, discard a card. Otherwise, discard 2 cards. You can -1 to create a 3/3 green elk creature token, and you can -5 for each other non-land permanent you control create a token that is a copy of that permanent. So yeah, you just go 4 mana, make a 3/3, and you have a planeswalker that can start attacking next turn. Nice. Like, if there's like a way to give, if you have like a haste creature, it's really good. I don't know. This just seems good. Just a 4-mana planeswalker that's just gonna, -1/-1, then maybe you +1 it. Like, it seems pretty decent to me. Pillage the Bog. Black green for a sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library. Rex is twice the number of lands you control. Put one of them in your hand and the rest in the bottom. I've seen this type of effect before. You can plot this card too. The art is actually sick, but that's fine. Like, at least they gave it good art. That's all I will say. Not a card that is particularly great in limited. Rakdos joins up. 3 black red for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with 2 additional +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to target opponent. Nice little enchantment. It makes it difficult for your opponents to kill your stuff. In some cases, it's again they've done so. Defossilize is a card that changed my card evaluation of 5-mana reanimate spells forever, because Defossilize was really good. Now, part of that was set specific environment, but part of it was making the creature bigger or drawing cards are both good outcomes, right? And so that was sort of like, oh, okay. If you're getting value or if you're getting additional like stats on your thing when you reanimate it for 5, that's when it starts to become good. And so I think this card's going to be good. Again, you don't want a ton of these type of effects, but I think that this one is strong enough that you will be happy to play it. Rakdos the Muscle. 2 black red for a 6/5 flying trample. When you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of your target player's library. Until your next end step, you may play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. You can also sacrifice another creature. This gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. You can activate this only once each turn. Until your next end step. I don't know. This card's just sick. It's just big. Like it's a 5 mana 6/6/5 flying trample, and then and is hard to kill. So I don't really have anything else to say about it. Riku of Many Paths. Green, blue, red for a 3/3. When you cast a modal spell, choose up to X, where X is the number of times you chose a mode for that spell. You can exile the top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play it. Put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. It gains trample until end of turn, and you can create a 1/1 bird with flying. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. This seems fine to me. Like, there are modal spells in the set. This card is okay, but is this worth, like, stretching your mana base to do? Probably not. But is it a card that will be good in decks where, like, it's a reward for doing this thing. It's not really a reason to do this thing. If you're in a multicolor green deck already, and you see this, like, pick 3, you're going to be like, okay, I'll pick this thing up, and we'll try to make it do a little bit more than usual. But, you know, I wouldn't pack 1, pick 1 this with the intent of, like, trying to do the cast a bunch of modal spells thing. I don't think that's where you want to be with this card. Roxanne. 3 red green for a 4/3. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, create a tapped colorless artifact creature token named Meteorite with. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to any target, and you can tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And whenever you tap an artifact token for mana, add 1 mana of any type that artifact token produced. So basically, the Meteorite taps for 2. 5 mana 4/3, deal 2 to something, make a Meteorite. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Is it tier 1 good? I don't think in this format it's tier 1 good. But is it really good? Yeah, it's really good. It's really solid. I'm really happy to have that card in my deck. So, yeah, I like it. No complaints from me. Ruthless Lawbringer. 1 black-white for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, destroy target non-land permanent. So this card, I think, is a bit of a trap, perhaps. There is fodder in the set. There's fodder in the set. This card, you know, it enables you to hit permanents and all that, but it does nothing by itself. And cards that do straight up nothing by themselves. So again, this card kind of, you know what this card kind of looks like is the spider from Brothers War. It's making me like this a lot more, isn't it? It's making me like this more. Because I originally had it in tier 2, and then I moved it down, because I was like, no, but it needs another creature. But then I'm like, oh, but that spider had reach. But that was 4 mana. That spider was tier 1. So I think I'm actually going to put this up to tier 2. Hold on. Alright, I've done it. I've moved it up to tier 2. So yeah, I just convinced myself that you're gonna have enough fodder in black and white to do this consistently enough, and hitting any non-land permanent is really nice. It'd be cool if they made it hit any permanent, because then whatever. It's fine. It's fine. Someday in the future we'll get to have fun once again, but we're not ready for that yet. Sachuru the Infiltrator. Blue-white, or blue-black for a 2/3 menace. When it or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if none of them were spent if mana was not spent to cast it, draw a card. Essentially, if you plot something and then cast it, this thing will draw you a card. Great thing. It's also a 2/3 menace for 2, which is really strong, so I'm putting it in tier 1. This could end up being more closer to tier 2. It's probably more right, but I don't know. It's sweet. It's whatever. It's a cool card. Really good. Either way, it's a good card. It's gonna be, nice. Zavala Eager Trailblazer. 2 green, white for a 4/5 with vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with. I don't need to read the thing. And you can tap it and choose a color, add 1 mana of that color for each different power among creatures you control. So, on turn 4, you can play this and cast one of your plot creatures, and then you just get the mercenary token immediately. It's also for mana 4/5 vigilance that taps for mana. It also is a huge threat that your opponent has to kill. So, yeah. Really good. Really good card. Zephyrix Steed. Green-white for a 2/2, first strike lifelink. When it attacks while saddled, you create a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying, and it has saddle for 4. Fortunately, there's tons of creatures in the set with power 4 or greater as a result of it being one of the things green cares about. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be pretty unbeatable. Your opponent, you cast this on 2, you're going to be able to saddle it on 3 a somewhat decent percentage of the time, and then it's kind of just over. Like, if you're on the play this thing, saddle it on 3. Game's kind of over. This is going to be one of the best ones. I mean, obviously, again, it has its spots where it's bad, but First Strike Lifelink is just such a combination, you know? Slick Sequence. Blue-red for an instant. It deals 2 damage to any target. If you've cast another spell this turn, draw a card. Really like this. Really solid. Golden common. Again, it works with the all the plot stuff. It works with all the other stuff you're doing in this color. It's an instant. Good one. I don't know. I like it. not a whole lot to say about it. 2 mana, 2 damage is not a great rate. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. Tywalk in Perfect Shot. Red, white for a 2/3. When a source you control deals non-combat damage equal to a creature equal to that creature's toughness, you draw a card. If you pay X and tap it, if a source you control will deal non-combat damage to a permanent or a player this turn, it deals that much damage plus X instead. So this is just like a nice 2-drop that sometimes like randomly will draw you a card, but is kind of finicky otherwise. But yeah, I mean, I should probably I'm gonna go make the blue ninja the same grade as this. I think they're both tier 2 cards. They're both really good, but not amazing. Like, you're gonna be first picking them most of the time, but they're still not like busted, you know. The Gitrog, Ravenous Ride. 3 black, green for a 6/5 trample haste. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards and put X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. X is the sacrifice creature's power, and you can saddle for 1. So, I mean, 5 mana 6/5 trample haste is just really, really good. You can saddle it with like your 3-drop. If your 3-drop was getting blocked by your opponent's 3/4 or something, now you can cash it in for cards, and then you get to put lands into play if you want. That's like not super huge upside, but it's great. Yeah, I mean, it's just as huge. It just allows you to get value into your creatures. You don't have to sacrifice the thing. It just hits it just smashes. It's just a smasher. I don't know what you want me to say. Just a big guy. Speaking of smashers, Vile Smasher. Gleeful Grenadier. Black-red for a 3/2. Whenever another outlaw enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, or to target opponent. Yep. No complaints, right? Like, just solid, really good 2-drop. That also deals your opponent extra damage over the course of the game. This is going to be triggering a lot. This is a really good crime enabler, so be advised. Vraska joins up. Black-green for a legendary enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, put a death touch counter on each creature you control. Whenever a legendary creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. We've seen effects like this before. You know, giving all your creatures death touch is good, but you do need to have the creatures in play first, and like this is 2 mana, and it does nothing if you don't have like a board. It doesn't help you if you're behind, even if you're like giving your creatures death touch. How relevant is that? Like, I guess I should put it this way. How different is it for you to have like 2 creatures with death touch and like 4 creatures with death touch? It's not that different, you know what I mean? Once you have your first death touch creature, you kind of don't really need more than that. Because it's more likely your opponent's going to be able to like block, like it's more likely the blocks don't matter, essentially. It just gets less and less valuable the more of it you have, so going wide with it is not super exciting. And you have to like actually get through to draw the cards, so yeah, not a big fan of this one. Vraska the Silencer. 1 green-black for a 3/3 with death touch. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1. If you do return that card to the battlefield tapped under your control, it's a treasure instead of being something else. So essentially you can pay 1 to make treasures when your opponent's stuff dies, and it keeps their stuff out of their graveyard, which is probably good. Yeah, I mean, solid card. Not busted by any means, but solid. Wrangler of the Damned. 3 white blue for a 1/4 with flash. At the beginning of your end step, if you haven't cast a spell from your hand this turn, create a 2/2 white spirit creature token with flying. So, once again, we encounter the 5 mana signpost uncommon problem that I talk about a lot, where even if this card were better, being 5 mana makes it kind of tough. I think this card's very bad. You are forced to pass with 5 mana up, which has some equity, right? Like, you are threatening to do other things, but, you know, kind of gotta cast this if you can. It is not amazing at blocking or attacking. It does make a bunch of 2/2s every turn, but if you're blue-white and you're passing with 5 mana up, your opponent can just be like, this is a card they could have. What if I held up my 2 mana removal spell for it? And it's like, well, that was a disaster. I just lost the game because I spent 5 mana getting my thing. Like, it is pretty telegraphed that you have this. And they have a lot of time to remove it. So it's just, this whole, like, getting stuff at your end step for not casting spells is just not, it's just not where I want to be. So, yeah. Alright, the final multicolored card. Wily Duke, Aten Hero. 1 green-white for a 4/2 vigilance. When it becomes tapped, you gain 1 and you draw a card. Solid card, you know? I mean, when you tap it, when you mount or crew or find some other way to tap it, gain 1 life, draw a card. Yeah, I like it. Solid. I mean, I don't really have any complaints. It enables a bunch of the set stuff, like it does mounts, it does whatever. It is a green and white card, so it's gonna be being tapped quite a bit because those are the colors that have a bunch of mounts in them. And that's it. That's the multicolored cards for this set. I hope you enjoyed. Somehow this was only like 2 minutes longer than the black cards set of the review, which I don't know how that happened. I must have just been cooking on that one. But if you did, I'll see you next time.